Hey everybody, P.A. Turner, co-host of Popping the Bubble. This episode is sponsored by us over here at Lions Rock Productions. What do we do? Content management strategy. We'll help you create podcasts, develop strategies, consult on what you've got. If you want to take a look at content, we would love to have an opportunity to do that for you. Now let's get back to Popping the Bubble.
This is Popping the Bubble with hosts Sandra Ponce de Leon and Pete A. Turner.
I'm Melanie Matheu, co-founder and CEO of Prellis BioLogics.
And I'm Noelle Mullin, co-founder and CSO of Prellis BioLogics.
And you're listening to Popping the Bubble.
So easy, just like that.
Are
These
those
ladies
all
are
going to
awesome.
be like all those outtakes?
Yeah, we're going to do a special outtake reel with you ladies. Yeah, so we are super stoked. Sandra's sitting here next to me, and we're at Prellis Bio, and you guys can check them out, prellisbio.com. What you're doing is, I don't know if you guys know, but it's changing everything. You are, and I'm going to get these words wrong, and you guys are going to correct me when I screw it all up, but ultimately we're talking about printing organs. You guys are talking about microvascular printing with laser printers, lasers, right? So we want to get into this and also thank IndieBio because we've met you guys through them. So thank you very much, IndieBio. You guys are fantastic. We also love what they're doing because they're doing the macro, changing the world. But there are 130,000 people on an organ donation list. And right now you guys are working to make that number shrink exponentially, if not down to zero, if possible. And that, first off, I'm going to speak for all of humanity right now. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. One of the questions that Sandra and I want to ask is, we'd love to hear your founder story. Like, how did you guys meet? At one point, one of you went, holy crap, you know what we can do? And then you figured it out. So we'd love to hear this part of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that kind intro. It is our mission to shrink that organ wait list. And that wait list is only a small sampling of people that are actually in need of an organ. There are so many more people that aren't eligible for a wait list. If you're on dialysis, you're not eligible for a wait list.
Right.
And so this isn't just about those 130,000 people. It's closer to millions.
And those are the people that aren't aware. Like they have a kidney that's failing because they haven't sought help. Because I'll speak for all of us dudes, we're bad at that. We're just like, whatever.
Chronic kidney disease, it's slow, it's progressive. Most people don't realize they have it till they're in their 50s or 60s. But let's start with the founder story.
Please.
And we'll go there.
Okay. Go back there.
We'll go back there. Yeah, I get passionate about those numbers. I worked in laser tissue imaging for probably about 15 years, and I had an academic career in that space studying the immune system. I was starting to think a little bit about tissue engineering, and I was researching it, and I realized that we could reverse engineer this microscope to print tissue. Well, I was an immunologist and someone with a background in biophysics and a bit of laser work behind me, but I had no idea how I would get these cells to do the right thing once we got them into the tissue. And that's where Noelle comes in. Yeah,
so my background is essentially in cell and developmental biology. So I'm kind of on the cell culture side of thing, understanding how these cells are actually going to behave once we put them in a printed situation. And once we get kind of the form in, how are they going to interact with each other? How are they going to talk to each other? So I've spent my grad work studying cell and developmental biology, stem cell and regenerative medicine particularly. I did some grad work around that and also a postdoc as well. So.
Wow.
And how we met's actually kind of a funny, long story. So I was on a swim team with her husband at the age of 5. And then we ended up going to the same high school. We just grew up in the same town. And when I came back to UCSF to do a postdoc, this is the area I'm from, he lived nearby and he said, oh, you've got to meet my wife. You guys, do you know her already? And I'm like, no, we're in totally different branches of science. We don't know each other. He was right. We ended up becoming great friends. And there's some old pictures of us running beta breakers together. and so,
are you kidding?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Some good surf trips together.
Yeah, some good surf trips. Yep. So... it was really lucky that when I looked around and I realized I needed a strong co-founder with an expertise in stem cell biology to start this company, that Noelle is the first person that came to mind. And she took the leap with me.
I know we covered it, but I just want to say this again because it's hard to understand. And the thing for the audience is that they're listening while they're doing the dishes. So I'm going to say this again. You guys are figuring out right now how to print organs.
That's right.
And if you have a bad kidney, if you have a bad liver, again, tell me when I get wrong any of these things.
Nope.
But this is what we're
That is
talking
the goal.
about. How far into the future? And I'm not going to say you said on November 15th that but
We're aware of dates. Yeah.
yeah. So, is it fair to say in 15 years that there will be some ability to swap out some kidneys?
So the last time I heard a podcast on this was a cardiac surgeon was asked a similar question, and he hemmed and hawed a bit. And the truth is, at that point, he said, "Well, maybe 20 years."
Okay.
And I think with the technology that we're developing, it's going to be more like 5 to 8.
Wow. I wasn't ready for that answer. So, and obviously things slide. It's science. It's weird.
Right.
And a lot of things have to happen. We have to do it safely and everything. But in 5 to 8 years, that's people that right now are getting bad news that are going to be able to have really good news at some point. How if it is, say, 5 years, when can we start to test on actual human subjects? Because that's earlier than 5 years then.
Right, it's earlier than 5 years. So we'd be pushing 3 or 4 years, and we think there's such a fundamental need, and people really don't have options that we may find a way to fast track this if it's working properly.
Yeah, right. If you have no other option, let's give this a shot. I remember, I don't know if maybe you remember this, but there was a woman that did an AIDS vaccine, like in the 80s, and she inoculated. It's like, wow.
Right, right.
It's interesting. And then are we talking kidneys first? Is it going to be, or can you even say?
Right. So we're at the stage right now where we're just trying to print the vasculature systems and prove that those work. And that's truly a building block into building any organ and any organ system. The kidney is very attractive because it lends itself well to our technology. We can do complex three-dimensional structures like what you find in the kidney and print them in a way that no one else really can. And so it is attractive. There's a major need for kidney. 81% of the donor wait list are kidney transplant or people waiting for their kidney transplant. And so there is a major need there, and it is attractive. We're not dead set on which organ we're ultimately going after. And the reason we can say it's so much faster now is because we're solving an engineering problem.
Okay.
And then the back end of that is just making sure the cells are in the right place and doing the right thing. And that's where Noelle's expertise comes in.
Yeah, exactly. Really, as Melanie mentioned, really the roadblock to printing these organs is the microvasculature. And that's what we're working on right now. And we're actually moving quite quickly on that. And once we have that in place, we can really take that anywhere. And it is just a matter of layering in the cells. And of course, that there is a bit of biology to work out there, but solving that engineering problem of getting that vasculature out there is really the first step, and that's where we're making progress.
Let me slow you down and make sure that we're getting what we're talking about here, because right now you sound like the professor. It's like, Mike. So we're talking about the actual, the veins, the arteries, the things that bring the oxygen and other things to the organ.
Exactly. You really cannot have a functional, viable organ without the blood supply.
How thick is a capillary at the very end of the line?
So they're 5 to 10 microns in diameter, and they perfuse every organ, every bit of skin in our entire body. And one way I like to demo this to people who've never thought about what a capillary is really is if you press your fingers together, you can see they go kind of white. Mm-hmm. And then if you pull them apart, they go pink again. That's reperfusion in a capillary bed. They are so tiny, and they're throughout every part of our body, and no one's been able to print them yet.
Wow. So, this is the problem that you guys are working on, and then we believe that this is not solved, but it's about to be solved. Is that right?
We're printing our final designs right now, and then the next step is to run fluid through it and show oxygen exchange.
Exactly. And really the reason people haven't been able to print these is because of their size and how tiny they are, and the resolution that you would need to be able to print them. So you can think of traditional 3D methods such as extrusion printing. You just can't get that resolution needed, which is why the approach we're taking, which is completely different and novel, is really the first approach that should be able to do this printing.
Yeah, and the resolution speed trade-off is really critical here, because if you take a single pinpoint laser, you can get to that resolution, but it would take you years to print something that was even close to being functionally useful.
So I have a question. When you're talking about designing this or printing this vascular structure, does it need to be in a certain way, or does it need to be created in a certain way? Because it just seems like it's kind of a random, the way I guess our normal organs are sort of random, or obviously there's a science to it, but how do you guys replicate that same structure by laser printing?
Yeah, so that's a phenomenal question, and an important design element that we have been thinking about since the beginning. First of all, capillary beds seem to be different depending on which tissue they're in. It's very different if it's in the bone or a tooth or in the skin. And developmentally, the capillary beds tend to grow with an organ as it's growing in the womb. And so these are functionally laid out very well. But the way we're solving this problem to start is we've partnered with a company called 3Scan. They're another San Francisco-based company, and they have 1 micron resolution on entire organs, on the capillary beds of entire organs. And so they're providing us with data, and we can take that data and create a 3-dimensional CAD file out of it, and that's what we feed into our printing system. And so we're basing our organ and tissue structures on real data. We're not redesigning the wheel here.
Wow. When you print a kidney in this case, are all kidneys the same? Is there a different variety for a different, I don't know, like if I'm 6'8" and you're 4'11", like same kidney?
Yeah. Well, kidneys are really fascinating organs. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. They're kind of different in every person, and as long as you have a functional kidney, the structure of it isn't as consistent as we would think. I think it's 1 in 10 people have very abnormal kidneys, or a third kidney even, and most people just don't know it. It's fine. You live with it. It's great. But to get someone off dialysis, you need about 20% kidney function. Our first idea is to go after a kidney that's roughly the size of a business card, maybe a little larger. And that could be enough to get someone off dialysis permanently.
How many people come off dialysis normally?
Anyone who gets an organ transplant. So I think it's around 20,000, maybe a little under,
so basically,
a year in the U.S.
If you've got a diseased kidney system, you are not going to come off dialysis unless you either die or get a new kidney.
Get a new kidney, correct.
So basically the number is 0 until something crazy happens.
Correct.
And you guys are suggesting that something that's as thin as a business card as well? Or?
No.
So
It would be round. It would be round
Okay.
like a kidney. So you'd have all the collecting ducts in the inlet of the
Right.
vasculature. in
But
the center.
approximately that size, like an ounce of kidney or an ounce and a half worth of kidney, would you say?
Okay, let's think about this. I'm looking at a business card right now. Probably, like 4 to 6 ounces.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the reason why I asked that is how long does that take to make? Like we talked about years for a single laser,
Right.
but you guys have a system that's faster.
So centimeters cubed. And
Okay.
so our print size is limited only by the optics. It's not limited by anything more than laser power and the specialized optics we have
Right.
to distribute the laser. And so our first goal is to be printing centimeters cubed of tissue. We may just be able to use those centimeters cubed kind of like Legos to build the kidney out. Or if we can upgrade our optical system enough, we could print the whole thing at once.
Wow.
What was that moment like when you guys actually saw the printing happening and saw the vascular system come to be? What was that like for you both?
Yeah, I mean, it's just hard to explain when you are talking about, because we spent a lot of time building up to that point, designing the system, writing out on paper what it was going to look like, doing all the physics behind it to see if it was actually theoretical possible. Then you get in the lab, you build the system, which we were able to do incredibly quickly at IndieBio over the summer. And then when you see it first start to print, and it actually is printing as you calculated and as you imagined it on the white paper, that you're scrawling out in the office space, it's amazing. I mean, to be able to see it come to real life like that, it's hard to explain.
Do you save those note sheets and be like, this is when we figured it?
I probably should.
I think we have some photos of whiteboards.
Yeah,
that are
we have
just
a lot
mess.
of photos of whiteboards. They're a beautiful mess.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it was phenomenal. I remember going home that day and then even the next morning just like sitting there and I'm like, some dream we had on paper became reality. And we have our team to thank for that. We have a really, really good team of people who are truly inspired by this mission. And, it wasn't only us in there working and thinking about this at all. It was a true team effort, and when it worked, we just all stood in there and watched it. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah.
This work is amazing that you're doing, but it's still work. And there's days I've done a lot of time in combat zones, and you work, and some days you're just like, I just can't. Getting through today is a great day, and it's just a horrible day. But like the only thing I just got to get through today. You guys must have days like and then the next day it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that day-to-day stuff.
The grind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we both came to this as scientists, right? And we're used to really being able to put our heads down in the lab and just do work all the time. But when it comes to running a business and trying to get a startup off the ground, there's so much more to it. So that can feel a little bit like a grind sometimes. However, it's been, a really fantastic learning experience as well. But yeah, it definitely makes for long days and a lot of late nights.
Yeah, a lot of long days, a lot of late nights. We're really good at communicating to each other. So there's some days where I'm like, Noelle, I just need a couple extra hours to myself today. And she totally backstops me on that. Or we trade off pretty well, which makes us a great team. And our team understands that too. They see how hard we're working. I'm kind of like a pants on fire, crazy optimist about stuff though. So I'm always like really excited. Noelle's like, I didn't think I was a pessimist until I had to sit next to you every day.
I think we balance each other out.
We balance each other out really well. She's very optimistic too. But it's falling back on the idea that you touched on earlier, where we really will be changing people's lives, keeps you going through stuff that's hard or a lot of late nights.
It's incredibly motivating.
But do you have to purposely back off? Because you've got this mission and you're literally saving someone's life. Is that in the back of your mind where like, I can do a little more today? Or do you think about like, I need to raise my game today because I'm not feeling like doing my best and there's someone in a bed waiting on me? Like, do you feel that, or is that just too much to put on yourself?
I think once in a while I kind of step back and really focus on the long view as an inspirational token. But really, we have milestones that are in place, and we're working directly towards those to get to those. So once we get the working vasculature, we know that opens up a whole new set of options for us. And so, yeah, it's definitely in the back of our minds. It isn't our day-to-day conversation, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it would be so motivating just to have that gigantic mission over your shoulders to constantly guide you. You talked a little bit, we were talking earlier about the extension of this technology into other areas. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. We're just looking at a completely new way to print, as I mentioned. We're using lasers. We're able to get to resolutions that nobody has been able to get to before. So really, right now, you have this situation in this kind of environment where people have extrusion as a way of printing, and there's a lot of excitement about printing functional organs and tissues. But the timeline for that feels very futuristic. And it's always been clear that something fundamentally needs to change in the tech and the approach in order to actually get to the point where the organ and tissues are a reality. And so rather than just improving on the methods that are already out there, we need to really shake it up. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to come in with a new novel approach that will allow us to achieve the print speeds and the print resolution required to get to that organ. We kind of think of it as the next generation of tissue engineering.
Yeah, and because we're using such a novel printing method, it lends itself well to development of other products as well. So we've been looking a lot at medical devices that are pre-seeded with cells, things like microstents that are useful in brain bleeds. There are a lot of options because we can print these things very quickly. We can print it in a way that's non-toxic to the cells. We don't need to seed the cells after the cells are already embedded in the structures. Because we can print rapidly, we can print at super high resolution. This opens the doors to more than just organ printing, although that's our primary focus.
Yeah, we love the happy accidents within these things.
Right.
What about rejection? What is this going to be my own cells?
Yeah, so that's the goal. I mean, it's going to differ depending on the actual organ that we're printing, but really the goal is to source the cells, the printing material, or the things that we're printing with, I should say, from a patient's own cells. So there's been some really phenomenal, advances in the field of stem cell biology that makes this possible. You can take skin cells and get skin fibroblasts and actually reprogram them back into pluripotent stem cells. It's called the induced pluripotent stem cell technology, or IPS cells. That's one approach that we're very interested in. Also taking tissue biopsies and relying on adult stem cell populations to as sources of the organ is another approach. But either way, if we can take cells from a patient's own body and then later avoid issues with immunorejection and having people on immunosuppressive drugs for the rest of their life, that would be a tremendous advancement in the field.
And the printing material we're using is meant to be either fully biocompatible or biodegradable. And so we're using things that are not harmful to the body. I've gotten that question before of, okay, great, it's my own cells, but what about the stuff they're embedded in? Well, it's going to be collagen-based or another bioprinting matrix that's known to be fully biocompatible and non-toxic.
Amazing. I was actually going to ask that same question, so thanks for asking it.
No problem. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your journey from scientists to entrepreneurs. What have been some of the surprises along the way?
Yeah. So I like people and I like working with people. I have a lot of collaborative research that's been published. And so I think that already gave me a head start in the business world because it's a lot of interactions and communications. But yeah, I mean, just as simple as learning the language of investing and the basics around that, what is a term sheet and what does it look like and what is a good one versus a bad one? It's a steep learning curve. IndieBio did a great job of helping us with a lot of that. We've read a lot of books. We're researchers, so that helps too by nature. Yeah, it's a shift in your mindset. It's not about being in the lab anymore. It's not just slow-paced, data-driven results. It's about getting to showing proof of concept, really, on everything. So proof of concept, what's the next thing? Proof of concept, what's the next thing? And, then you backfill and make sure it's repeatable and real. The pace is incredibly different. I think that's one of the biggest shocks coming from academia to industry.
I think I'll second the pace. Yeah, it's so much faster than academia. And I should really, credit Melanie for pulling me into this project because I was pretty happily embedded as a postdoc in my academic track. And
sorry.
Sorry,
not sorry.
And I was living the academic life and, kind of doing the research thing when she approached me with this idea. That shift happened a little sooner than I thought it was going to happen for me to jump in full time to the startup. But it's just been so fun since doing that. I mean, the pace, the collaborative nature of it, everything is a team effort. And it feels very different than, just being in a lab. There's so much more to it. It has been really great.
As researchers, as academians, now turned entrepreneur founders, you still have your calling. You must feel compelled to peer review, publish.
Absolutely.
So that is a priority and a goal for us.
How on earth do you manage all that? Because I also have some peer review things completely useless compared to what you guys are doing. But you're talking such a micro thread. It's like one thing that you're either building, challenging, or inventing. How do you pick just the tiny micro thread when you're doing so much stuff? I mean, you're constantly doing proof of concepts. That's a paper every time.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be when we do publish this, and we're planning to, it's going to be several steps involved in it. So not only the novel printing system and how that works,
right,
and then the vasculature, just what you can do with it. And vasculature, I think, will be the demonstration step there, and potentially some live functional tissue as well. So they all feed into each other. All of these steps are logical until we start to branch off into different products and whatnot. But really demoing the novel engineering, the novel printing, and what we can do with it would be our main thrust for publication.
And it is really important for us to publish. We believe in disseminating these results to, the general public. And also, what we're doing is a bit science fiction. And so to have it be peer reviewed would be, incredibly helpful and just a lot of validation. So
yeah, a lot of good validation from the field. And we both believe in that process as well as academic scientists. We believe in validating our results. And so we're moving extremely fast with proof of concept, but this is real. So we want to show that to the world. And
talk a little bit about the laser printer itself. Is that something that eventually you'll have multiple printers and start selling those, across the board? That's a business model in and of itself also, right?
Yeah, definitely. So we do have a design that's got some IP around it where we would do kind of a desktop in incubator, or rather in tissue culture hood printer. But the optics of this are kind of tricky and sensitive. And so to build a full-scale 3D holographic printer and ship it out to someone, for the time being, that's not on our radar. Yeah, we're going to focus on producing tissues.
When you guys publish, a lot of this stuff is known. Cell biology, that kind of thing. So there's a ton of literature that you've got to provide in the lit review, but a lot of this stuff is not.
Right.
When you guys put something in front of your peers that just is way far out there, are you guys that far ahead that they've got to go, where's the literature? Or do they go, we understand that you guys are writing this new stuff?
So this is a really interesting thing. So if you look in the body of physics and optics literature, we're not that far out there. And if you look in the body of cell biology literature around what they're trying to do with tissue engineering, we're also not that far out there. No one has put them together.
Combined them. Mm-hmm.
And so finding the special cohort of reviewers that will be able to appreciate that will be important. Hopefully we'll have at least one from each field. A lot of engineers would recognize this easily and know that this technology exists. And a lot of biologists would also recognize what we're doing. It's just a matter of combining two fields to build something novel.
What's the cost going to be for a kidney, for a liver?
We're hoping for around $120,000 to $140,000.
Give us some context. What does that mean in terms of now?
So that is about the cost that someone would pay for a kidney transplant. So we're definitely trying to not make it much more costly than that. And of course, it would be much more available. So there'd be a lot of advantages there.
More available, also less of a recovery maybe, or?
Less of a recovery, and if we can use a patient's own cells, the lack of immunosuppressive drugs for the rest of their life, obviously.
So the net is actually, should be less expensive, although we're not talking about something that's bargain basement or anything.
No, just, being off immunosuppressive drugs alone, I think would be a major achievement. People who are on chronic immunosuppression have 3 times of a higher rate of dying from cancer, from super aggressive cancers. Our immune system usually takes care of cancerous cells, but it can't in those situations. And then, paying for $20,000 a year in immunosuppressive drugs is expensive and not very good for you.
Can there be a higher quality of organ? Like, can you get like the Cadillac of livers or something?
The super organ, right. So we have some tiered pricing or something now. Well, first we want to build it and make it work. Second, if there's, a greater need where, let's say, someone has complete loss of kidney function and they're on dialysis versus someone who has, 95% or 90% loss and they have 10% functioning less. I mean, maybe we'd produce a larger kidney. Maybe they get 2. There could be some room to help someone who needs it. Yeah.
So what's the process for actually making this come to life, so to speak, or pun intended there? I mean, how you said 5 years for you guys to actually be in market, but what about for a patient? Like, how does somebody, that sees what you guys are doing and, wants to maybe be a part of it or volunteer themselves, be your first guinea pig? How does this all work?
Well, we're going to go through the FDA for all of this, so there probably won't be any,
volunteer guinea pigs.
Recruiting of guinea pigs. We want to make sure everything's by the book.
As much as we want to help people as fast as we can, there's also a very important clinical vetting that we need to do. Things like perhaps donated organ biopsies would be useful for us to start testing some of the protocols and developing the cells. So something along those lines could be helpful. Yeah, but no volunteers. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're not trying to cut regulatory processes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you guys aren't mad scientists yet.
Yeah,
but if there was like a venture capitalist, like I'd like a free sample,
right.
Like here's a round of funding. No, we'll get away from that altogether. It's a joke, and we'll move on from that. But there must be challenges. You guys, you're scientists. It's step by step. I know one of the things that we talked about just earlier today with Finless Foods is like the depth of the tissue that you guys can achieve.
Right. If you look at any announcements around human tissue engineering, in fact, even ones that came out last month, it's only a sheet of tissue. No one's doing anything thicker than about 2 pieces of paper pushed together. So 250 microns to 300 micrometers thick. That's the limit of diffusion for oxygen and nutrients and waste products. So when you try to build cell layers that are thicker than that, these cells become hypoxic. They don't have oxygen in the center. The wastes build up and the cells start to die. That's why the microvasculature really, really is critical for building a whole organ. Tissue engineering is just stalled at single sheets of cells. There's no one who's done anything differently. Putting the capillaries in there will allow for us to build organs. It's not just that we're doing an incremental step. We're actually now able to even think about building full organs.
Is that the capillary? Is that what creates the structure for the organ?
Yeah.
Am I asking the question wrong?
No.
She looked at me funny.
Sorry.
There's lots of different structures.
Lots of different structures. So.
Yeah, we think about structure all day long. So you just sent us down our own mental rabbit hole. Which structure? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it does inform the shape of the organ. So you always have to make sure you have capillary every 250 microns, exactly what Melanie was saying. There's a lot of other structural components too, which we can actually capitalize on the printing process. So that's when we're printing with collagen, for instance, we can kind of mimic that structure to get the actual structure of the organ, because that's incredibly important for function as well.
This is so incredible and amazing technology. Do you guys ever, I mean, and it's, you're creating life. Your tagline is life from light, right?
Yes.
So do you guys ever maybe have a little bit of a God complex at all?
We try to avoid this. There's a running joke. Do I get to tell this joke? There's a running joke in our company that our biggest market is actually little tiny dinosaurs that will run around. You can get one for Christmas. But, and also, the other running joke is no eyes and no nervous systems on anything.
But I mean, the reality is we are, in a sense, trying to create organs from light, but we're not creating cells de novo. We're using processes that are already around. We're taking stuff that is occurring in a dish and we're just giving 3D structure to it and dimension to it so that it can actually function and be a therapeutic.
Yeah. If anything, creating life from light is really about giving people their own lives back. That's how we think of it. We're giving you your own organ back. You can get off dialysis. You can stop dragging around an oxygen tank if you have COPD. Start to live again.
The ability to live again is huge. And we probably shouldn't go past this without saying you ought to consider Alec Baldwin as a celebrity spokesman, because remember when he was a surgeon in that movie? He's like, I am God.
Yes.
Perfect for you guys.
This is not off the list at all.
So what about skin? Can we do flesh, you think?
Yeah, I mean, skin is definitely one of the targets that we're very excited about. My research actually as a postdoc prior to joining the startup was all in skin development and skin cancer. So something that we're especially excited about skin is that, currently they can actually engineer a sheet of skin and they use it for burn victims and other various applications. However, without the vasculature, this is basically a glorified Band-Aid that they're using. So if we can actually go in and layer skin on top of vasculature, this becomes more of a living solution to some of these injuries and burns, so that you can actually put this in. It will, fuse with your healthy working vasculature and actually really just recreate the skin that was lost, as opposed to just being kind of a temporary stopgap. So that absolutely is something that we're looking at as an application.
What are some of the ethical questions? Because what comes to mind is someone who's got liver disease, caused by alcoholism, and the addiction is always going to be there. Whether they manage it or not, that's not up to you guys. Mm-hmm. But there's also not a shortage of livers if they've got the money and the coverage to get it, or someone that wants to replace skin on their face because of aging and everything. Have you guys? You must have at least talked and dealt with this. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's obviously a huge cosmetic market for what we're doing. The ethics around organ transplantation for people who've dealt with a disease like addiction, it's tricky, right? Why if someone from a genetic disease background be put in a different place than someone who was actively making choices around addiction or not?
But then on the other side of that, can you contribute to someone's continued abuse of everybody around them? Right. It's tricky.
Yeah. That's a really hard and a really interesting ethical question. I think, for us, we're providing the opportunity for someone to live on and change. I actually know someone who has been clean from alcohol abuse for, I think, 35 years because he had to have a liver transplant in his 20s.
Right.
And he was that abusive of his own body. His family had to take care of him, and he had an emergency liver transplant. They wouldn't have done it if he was older. So that's another interesting ethical question. If you're older, do you deserve to not have that chance, those extra 10 years, right? So that's something we'd be giving people an option for. But sometimes when a person goes under the knife, they can have a real epiphany around things they've been doing in their life. And so that's a story that's, I know someone like that. Not everyone's like that, but that's not up to us to make the choice. We just be providing that option.
And I think one thing that is kind of neat about this as the alternative technology is that a lot of those ethical questions that you have to make decisions around when you're talking about a transplant waitlist, who deserves the organ over someone else, those are really difficult and they're frankly not fair. So if we can come up with another source of organs and avoid asking some of those ethical questions to begin with, I think that's actually going to really change things.
This does add something to the physical doctor who's sitting there. It's like someone who is going to get some kind of gastric bypass situation. Mm-hmm. If you haven't got control, like if you need this as the next step, great. But maybe someone that's in a similar situation where they can't stop abusing themselves, their family, their substance of choice, maybe it's not time for them. And as much as you hate to, write them off, they have to do the work to make this thing viable, even if it is available, because at some point you can't get 3 livers.
Right.
It's just
Unless
not
they have
something you can do.
incredible insurance.
Yes.
But yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah, I just, at this point we're focused on providing the option because there is such an incredible need, and it's the number of ethical questions. I think what we'll be doing is we'll be erasing a lot of ethical issues around there's black markets for organs.
Sure.
There's all sorts of insane stuff going on. We're going to erase a lot of those problems and open up new ethical questions around, okay, like, do we give you that 3rd liver?
How many chances you get?
How many chances? And that's not something we want to dictate, and certainly are not the people to.
Right.
But I think we're going to be trading a set of very significant and terrible problems for some nicer issues to be discussing.
For sure.
Yeah.
And let's look to the future a little bit, because you guys are changing so many things, and it is incredible. But it does open up a whole world of opportunities where there is literally no medical care in some places.
Right.
And it's, you don't send a kidney off to Botswana or something, but there is the ability to get a kidney in a person there at some level, in a place where there may not be an x-ray machine for 50 miles in any direction. And it's incredible to be able to provide that kind of thing. What else do you guys foresee, even just in your wildest dreams, like maybe down the road we'll be able to do what? What's out there?
Tiny dinosaurs.
A teacup T-Rex.
Exactly. To be honest, I'm pigeonholing myself a little here. We're just so dead set and focused on getting these organs and tissues right. That is the future to us. We think it's going to result in longer life for many people that are very deserving and have families and friends and people that would miss them terribly and have an honest chance to continue to get back to society. So the way I look at the future is that if we can do this and do it effectively, it will shift the way our society functions. We will have great-grandparents that we can call and talk to.
Yeah.
And, depths of wisdom will be, it's impossible to write down the wisdom of a lifetime. No one can, but we can still have those conversations with people. I think as generations pass, we have short memories as human beings. We forget that how terrible World War II really was and the sacrifices people made, or World War I even. No one remembers that,
about?
Right? That doesn't exist. These ideas of, war games are fun, or, what's going on in our political climate today. If we had a deeper memory as a society and a group of people, I think it will fundamentally shift the way we approach life. And so if I'm looking to the future, that's what I'm hopeful of.
That's heavy. Yeah, that's heavy.
Yeah.
When you look at the ability to create organs on a mass scale, I mean, let's just say, for example, there's a regional plant here in San Francisco, and you're cranking out the 120,000 livers that need to be created. We talked to Finless Foods earlier today, and a lot of the jobs in the fishing industry are going to go away, and we're all worried about this. But apparently we're going to need surgeons that can swap out parts, because you're talking about, look, there's not a lot of vascular surgeons that are like, I got tons of spare time. I mean, if you guys had 55 extra livers a month, I'd put it, like that's going to be a field where it's going to absolutely change. And then once the mechanics in this case get in there and get under the hood, they're going to say, hey, I need a little more of this. Or, before we do this quadruple bypass, could you form this bypass or whatever it's going to be? Yeah, talk about that a little bit if you guys can. It's not really a question. Just say something.
Sure. I'll say something about that, and I'll let Noelle follow up because I think she has some good ideas around this too. So I just came back from a really interesting tech conference in Europe called Slush. There's a lot of discussion there around AI and replacing physicians, replacing primary care physicians. And actually, if we do a better job of preventative and primary care, a lot of those jobs are going to disappear for physicians. So I think we'd actually be adding back and giving them the opportunity to maybe go back and specialize in kidney transplant or liver transplant. I think those jobs will show up. Yeah, and then, the chronic long care, palliative care that isn't great for anyone and is incredibly costly on every society in the world, that will go away. And so I think it'll be an economic boom on two fronts there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and kind of, it's funny that you bring up finless foods and bringing away, taking away the fishermen. I feel like the jobs that we're replacing are the donors, the cadavers, and that's not a job that anybody wants.
Yeah. So. Exactly. Well said.
Yeah. Well, and there is going to be some kind of job reorientation with what you guys have, especially because we're just talking about kidneys specifically right now.
Right.
But, can a surgeon swap out a kidney or a liver or skin, or is that a multidiscipline doctor, or is it a singular?
It's a
transplant surgeon.
Transplant surgeon,
Transplant
right?
surgeon,
And they'll
yeah.
often specialize in one type of surgery or another. But kidney transplantation has been around for decades, and
Right.
it's very well understood.
But still, the ability to do 100,000 more of them a year would be and that's 4 nurses and a lab
Right.
tech, and just it's a lot of
Yeah,
things.
there may be a new bottleneck. We may be removing the bottleneck from the procurement of the organ and shifting it to the transplant, but hopefully there'll be solutions.
Maybe we'll have
yeah.
some more specialists coming out of medical school. I can only hope. Yeah,
Are these things printed on demand?
that's the idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what's the time frame on that?
So we're estimating about 4 months.
Okay,
So
and that's
4
enough time. That's within the window of you're going to need something, and then
You're going to need something. We'll take a biopsy. And this is all in an ideal world where
Of course.
everything's working seamlessly. The idea is that you would see your transplant surgeon. If there's no kidney available or you're not a candidate for the wait list, we would be another option. So you do a cell biopsy. You'd send the cells to us. Noelle and her team will grow them up, and then we will print them and functionally test the organs, make sure they're right and they're working in the way we expect them to, and then send them back for transplantation.
what about transplantation for animals?
This is another market that's been brought up to us before.
Yes, people love their pets.
I know,
We
'cause
all love our pets.
My fish is looking a little green.
New gills.
I mean, we probably will be doing this in mice before we ever get to humans. So
Absolutely.
so that could
Yeah.
be a start.
So animals are a great starting point for making sure the technology works well. In fact, a necessary starting point if we expect to take this into humans. We need to prove that it is safe, and we want to. So a lot of people who love their cats, I think cats get kidney disease, and dogs. It's not off the list either. I think our main focus is to provide the life-saving options to people first.
For sure.
Yeah.
You guys are PrellisBio.com, Melanie and Noelle. What else can we talk about here before we wrap things up?
I think you've covered a lot of ground with us. This is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so
We
much.
want to keep telling your guys' story too, because it's just great. Hopefully, I never need your services, but it would be great to
I might
hear
need
more.
my own services. We don't know. Yeah.
You can go direct to the source.
Yeah,
direct to the
exactly.
source,
We've
yeah.
met you.
You have
This
an
is
in.
great.
Okay, well, thank you again very much. We really appreciate you guys coming on.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you, guys.
This has been wonderful. A lot of fun.